My name is Michael. Welcome to my channel. This story is called The Mysterious Encounter. In this narrative, I've chosen to anonymize all involved individuals to protect their identities.
Starting my 7th year in primary school, I attended a school in the then newly built area of Wicker Park. It was a large school with about 1,000 students, making one feel like a small fish in a big pond. Nonetheless, it was a good school. While most teenagers could be rowdy, order was generally maintained thanks to a few skilled and well-liked teachers who diligently did their jobs. My school days were relatively simple. I was unlikely to receive any diplomas, and what interested me most was spending time with my group of friends rather than dedicating time to my studies. So you can understand that my friends Felix, Richard, Leo, and I roamed around the newly built area during the days, doing all the things kids seeking excitement typically do. The school simply wasn't that appealing, especially when teachers constantly targeted us for scolding and reprimands. One day, Felix, Richard, Leo, and I ventured out to the water that separated Wicker Park from Ashland Avenue, intending to exchange cigarettes. The location was along Milwaukee Avenue, right next to the water where there was a wooden promenade. We chose this spot for its secluded nature. No one came here in the mornings, and by walking along the promenade, you could reach a long pier. This pier was the perfect spot for us to carry out our small crimes. The pier resembled a long walkway leading to a cake-shaped wooden structure where one could sit on the ledges and gaze out over the water. It was an excellent place to sit without attracting the attention of people passing by. As usual, I stood at the beginning of the walkway to prevent people from reaching the cake, as we called it, while Richard and Leo took care of the cigarettes we had acquired. Felix kept me company, and we spent a lot of time chatting about random things, feeling like real gangsters. Everything was much simpler back then, when a couple of cigarettes could make you feel involved in some shady business. Felix and I became alert when we noticed a group of girls approaching the pier along the promenade. Fortunately, we knew these girls from school and we had encountered them many times in different situations, so neither Felix nor I were unfamiliar with how to handle them. Troop stopped in front of Felix and me, and a sweet girl named Hannah stepped forward. It's worth noting that I was almost 5'9" at the time, making me one of the tallest in the whole school. This not only naturally commanded respect from some students, but also gave me an unhealthy sense of superiority. So Hannah stood in front of me, looking up with exaggerated self-assurance, demanding to pass. To start, you can probably imagine how it looked. Hannah stood there giggling and trying to convince me to reveal the secrets I was guarding. However, I just chuckled back and started feeling like a bouncer. Eventually, Hannah stepped back to join her friends. Suddenly, one of her friends stepped forward just like Hannah, standing in front of my feet. It was then that I realized it was none other than the school's latest newcomer, Rebecca. I knew it then and there. Rebecca was no ordinary girl. She was the kind who rarely said anything unless directly addressed, content to stand quietly and constantly observe everything and everyone. Yet within just a few weeks, she had earned herself a notorious reputation. She had a fierce temper and was not shy about getting into fights. Several people had already been beaten up by Rebecca and her friends, and the unsettling truth I had heard was that it was only guys she targeted. There I stood, my head slightly tilted downward, wearing a mocking smile towards the short, but dangerously new girl. See, no words were spoken. Rebecca just stared directly into my eyes with a serious expression that could have belonged to one of the teachers back at school. I took the opportunity to stare back into Rebecca's eyes and then discovered that her eye color was a dark brown shade, so dark that it was hard not to believe her eyes were black. Two infinite holes gazed at me, or maybe it was me who was gazing. I'm not really sure. In any case, I began to feel nervous. My exaggerated, mocking smile vanished, and I started wondering what would happen. Was I in line for a beating? Even though I was tall, I was hardly the one who engaged in physical fights during my childhood, as I was well aware even then. So The realization that Rebecca could very well harm me was enough to make me shudder with fear. Seconds passed, and I became more and more uncomfortable and anxious about what would happen. With that, Rebecca turned on her heel and walked back to her group of friends, leaving me more than relieved. Felix and I commented on what had happened and even managed to laugh about it, although I easily shrugged off unpleasant thoughts. It took many hours before I could erase the image of Rebecca's face. Her serious expression, where her two black eyes always were alert and observant. But now, years later, I am driven to madness by my mysterious encounter with Rebecca. Many would probably consider it a childish encounter between two schoolmates and be content with that. But her demeanor, how she simply walked up to me to stare into my eyes without moving a muscle in her face. In that gaze, I know I'm exaggerating when I say this, but looking back, I am sure there was something in her gaze that saw me, something that should never see the light of day, something that only emerges when the thirst for blood is most pressing. Who was Rebecca? What hid behind her black eyes? It's entirely possible that she was just an ordinary student who has grown up to be a completely ordinary young woman. But who was she really? Where did she come from? Did she have dreams she wanted to fulfill, other than beating guys bloody? And perhaps the most important question of all, what would have happened to me that day? If she had chosen to physically confront me, would I be here now to tell the tale?
And there you go. Another story sent to me that leaves you with questions. Let me know in the comments. What was this? Is it real? I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe, more content coming. Thank you and Happy New Year.